What's going on? It's Suck and I'm back with a brand new video on SuperDuprTech. And in today's video, I'll be showing you what it's like to play a handful of games on the most expensive 16-inch M3 Max MacBook Pro. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, so if you are new around here, then I must ask you to hit the subscribe button, clicking the bell to be notified when I upload any of my new videos. But without any further ado, let's hit the titles. So first things first, I do want to quickly mention the spec for the model that I am using in today's video. So this is the most expensive MacBook Pro that you can currently purchase, with it being the 16-inch MacBook Pro, with it coming with the M3 Max with a 16-core CPU, a 40-core GPU, 128GB of unified memory, along with 8TB of SSD based storage. Brand new over here in the United Kingdom, this MacBook Pro would set you back £7,299. So there were a number of different games which I played on this MacBook Pro. I'm just going to quickly go over some of these game titles. So I played Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Minecraft, League of Legends, Grand Theft Auto 5, CSGO, Firewatch, Fortnite, Hitman 2, CSGO 2, Cyberpunk, Thief Simulator 2, Watch Dogs Legion, Halo, Overwatch 2, Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 4, Watch Dogs 2, Hogwarts Legacy, Spider-Man Remastered, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Far Cry 6, Saints Row, Borderlands 2, Call of Duty Black Ops 3, The Witcher 3, X-Plane 11, Portal 1 and Portal 2, along with Death Stranding. Hey, so before I get into showing you the results that I got when playing games with this MacBook Pro, I do want to briefly touch up on the fact that I had originally planned on uploading this video a number of months ago, before we even had the announcement of WWDC this past June. Now, I put things on the back burner because I wanted to see if there were going to be any improvements to macOS at that WWDC. And boy was I right. With macOS Sequoia, we have improvements to the game porting toolkit, which bring with it improvements across the board. Now, with that being said, I didn't want to then upload that video, as things may stop working, some things may improve, and so I did not want to upload that video. And so I've now waited a number of months and weeks for macOS Sequoia to come out, and now that we've got the stable release of macOS Sequoia, I then went about conducting all of my testing. Now, all of the testing was conducted using the latest version of macOS Sequoia up to the 9th of October this year. And so at this point, it's worth me sharing my results. So in terms of the results that you're about to see in those charts basically were collated over the past couple of days. But in terms of the video footage, I'll be honest with you, it's recycled video footage that I captured a few months ago. So the eagle eye amongst you may notice a few things might look a little different between the games that you'll be playing today versus previously. Now, with that being said, I do want to let you know that we are on the road to 10,000 subscribers. And you're probably new around here, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. The M4 Max are probably a week or two away at this point, so make sure you subscribe to see those Macs compared to these Macs and all of that stuff. So make sure you hit subscribe, and without any further ado, let's take a look at the results. So I started off playing games at this MacBook Pro's native resolution of 3456 by 2234, keeping the graphics settings to high so that we have a little bit of wiggle room if we needed to squeeze higher frame rates. So taking a look at some of these results, we clearly see that the best performing games are League of Legends and Minecraft, which really is not any surprise as they are both native games running through macOS, and to be honest, we've seen this kind of result across the board with all MacBooks, with League of Legends and Minecraft performing the best. What's interesting is those Battlefield games are close to averaging 60 frames per second, which was something I hadn't come to expect. And sure, previously I have played these titles through Parallels, and now playing them through the updated game porting toolkit, we can clearly see that there are some vast improvements. Hitman 2 and both Spider-Man titles fail to run at this resolution, and other than Battlefield 1, Firewatch, Cyberpunk, Watch Dogs 2, Hogwarts Legacy, Far Cry 6, Saints Row and The Witcher 3, pretty much all of these games were able to average 60 frames per second. But of course this MacBook Pro has a 120Hz ProMotion display, so I wanted to see if all of these games were able to average above 120 frames per second. So I did what I have done previously and lowered the resolution, this time to 2560 by 1600, still keeping the graphics settings to high. Now the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that I'm also playing Grand Theft Auto through crossover using the game porting toolkit, whereas previously, like with those Battlefield games, I had been using Parallels. And sure, I have seen a noticeable increase in the performance using the game porting toolkit with crossover as opposed to using Parallels. So sure, if you are looking to play Grand Theft Auto, then I would strongly suggest you using crossover as opposed to Parallels. For whatever reason, I didn't really see any performance difference in playing Cyberpunk at 2560 by 1600 as opposed to the native resolution of this MacBook Pro. The same three titles were unable to play at this resolution, that's Hitman 2 along with both Spider-Man titles, which was and is still a little concerning, as I have seen people online on Reddit being able to play these Spider-Man titles at this resolution. So I'm not sure if there is anything that I'm doing a little weird, but yeah, for some reason I was still unable to get these games to run at this resolution. We see a steady increase in the amount of games being able to average above 60 frames per second, but once again we still see that Cyberpunk along with Watch Dogs 2, Hogwarts Legacy, Far Cry 6 and Saints Row were still unable to average above 60 frames per second. And when playing at this resolution, we see a steady increase in the amount of games that are averaging above 120 frames per second. These included games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, CSGO, and surprisingly, CSGO 2 was very close to averaging above 120 frames per second. But hey, I wanted to see what it would be like to play games at a resolution of 1920 by 1200, which is essentially a full HD resolution at this aspect ratio. With the graphics setting set to high, we see the best performing game was hands down League of Legends, with it averaging 278 frames per second, which was then followed up by Minecraft and then CSGO. We also find Hitman 2 finally being able to run at this resolution, with it playing very well, averaging 78 frames per second. So with the improvements made to the game porting toolkit, I had tried to play Hitman 2 through crossover using the game porting toolkit, but for some reason it was still not working as I had expected, with me still running it through Parallels. Other games that performed very well at this resolution were games like Overwatch 2, with them averaging over 100 frames per second. Now truthfully, I had expected Overwatch to average a little higher, as when playing at 2560 by 1600 it was averaging around 97 frames per second, whereas when playing at the resolution of 1920 by 1200 it increased its frame rate by a measly 6 frames per second, which when compared to some other games wasn't awfully that impressive. And then there were games like Halo, which really impressed me with the updates to the game porting toolkit. It was now averaging over 120 frames per second, thus maxing out the refresh rate of this MacBook Pro's ProMotion display. In terms of the other games, we actually see both Spider-Man titles playing on this MacBook Pro, which was very good. In terms of the overall frame rate, they were averaging well over 60 frames per second at this resolution, and when free roaming through New York City, I was averaging even higher. So in general, Spider-Man plays very well with this hardware, which was once again to be expected given the results that I got with other MacBooks. But yeah, it's quite impressive to see these kind of games playing on this hardware, especially with it running through a translation layer. I just wish there were more developers that would take Mac gaming seriously. And you'll also find other games like Saints Row average above 60 frames per second, which sure, while it's to be expected, it wasn't exactly something that I would sing and dance about, but overall its performance was very playable. So if you are looking to play games like Saints Row, then you really shouldn't have much if any of an issue. And then we've got games like X-Plane 11, which played very well with it averaging close to 80 frames per second at this resolution, which sure, it wasn't exactly something to sing and dance about, but at the end of the day, the game was still very playable, with you being able to navigate through the menus and fly the aircraft with little to no friction. I had wanted to see how these games would perform with the resolution lowered, and so I did exactly that, lowering the resolution to 1280 by 800. Now when playing games at this resolution, we see games like CSGO average above 200 frames per second, which was insane as it's basically the highest that I've ever seen this game average. And then we've got those Battlefield titles which were performing phenomenally well using crossover and the porting toolkit. And so going forward with any MacBook gaming video that I upload, Battlefield will now be tested using the game porting toolkit and crossover, as opposed to using Parallels, where I would find multiple issues and the smoothness of the gameplay really would not compensate for it. I'm happy to report that when it comes to playing those Watch Dogs titles, the Watch Dogs titles averaged above 100 frames per second. I'm also happy to report that when it comes to playing Watch Dogs Legion, this game was averaging above 100 frames per second at this resolution, and so I can only imagine how this game would perform when the M4 series of these chips gets released. And when it comes to playing Watch Dogs 2, this game was also averaging above 70 frames per second, which was great to see, as it's hands down one of my favourite games to play. Now if you was to ask me, Suki, what games would you like to see come across to be natively supported on macOS, I would hands down say Call of Duty. I've always been a COD player, and it sucks that the last Call of Duty that I can really play on this Mac is Call of Duty Black Ops 3. Now of course that has a number of things to do with the anti-cheat system that they've introduced across all of their games, including Warzone. So if you are looking to play Call of Duty, then yeah, you're not going to be able to play it at all, as the anti-cheat system will pick up crossover and it will of course also pick up Parallels. So here's to hoping that one day in the not so distant future, either Microsoft bring out Windows for ARM through Boot Camp on these devices, so we're able to play them like the good old days. But more so, I would really like to see Microsoft and Activision bring across Call of Duty for it to be natively available through all of these Macs. Could you imagine even being able to play Call of Duty Warzone at least 60 frames per second on even a MacBook Air, especially if it's a native game? I can seriously imagine MacBooks of the not so distant future being able to play a game like that, although the graphic settings and the resolution may have to be lowered to get certain frame rates. And I've never really had any issues playing either of the Portal titles, Portal 1 and Portal 2, and yeah, you pretty much see this here, with Portal 1 averaging 97 frames per second and Portal 2 averaging 90 frames per second. These games performed very well, with there being basically no issues for me to report on. So sure, if you are looking to play games and you want a MacBook and you've got a dying desire to spend over £7,000, then yeah, by all means go and buy it. I'm not going to stop you, do what you want with your money. But at the end of the day, don't go out there and predominantly buy a Mac to play games on. They're not really designed for that. But if you have a MacBook and you want to play a handful of games on it, especially if you've got the updated M3 MacBooks, then yeah, the chances are you're going to have a great time playing games on those Macs. I'm sure that the M4 chip, when it gets released in any up and coming Mac models, will bring great improvements, especially when paired with the updates to the game porting toolkit. And hey, make sure you hit that subscribe button, as I'm sure you'd like to see these MacBook models compared to any up and coming Macs. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, smacking that bell to be notified when those videos get uploaded. Make sure you go and hit me up on my social media, X and Instagram. I'll leave them linked down below in this video's description. And if you've got any questions, be sure to drop them down below in the comment section. But once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care and have a good one.